The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Stores. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
Welcome back in to First and 12. Man, it's been a great show today. So much BYU Utah talk. It's, after a game like that last night, how can you not just be unpacking every sort of angle? If you miss any part of the show, subscribe to the podcast on the KSL Sports app or wherever you get your podcasts. And this show brought to you by Macy's Grocery Store. Get the freshest fruits and vegetables from local farms and your local favorite brands. Macy's. Happy shopping. Alex, it's our favorite time of the show. It's time for the Big 12 Power Rankings.
The Big 12 Power Rankings. A weekly rank of all 16 programs, from the elite to the bottom dwellers.
Who's elite? Who are the bottom dwellers? My heavens. The BYU-Utah rivalry is one thing. The entire conference, top to bottom, what a freaking mess. What a mess that this conference has given us. Mitch, how are we supposed to figure this thing out? Because week on week, we keep just getting shocked by how these teams are just, it's like outdoing one another to try to get, it's a race to the bottom of the conference, it seems like in some cases. Like the bottom is beating the top and the top is losing to the bottom. And I'll tell you, BYU losing last night to Utah, if that were to have happened, which we were 2 seconds away from that happening, I would have just gone, yep, it's the freaking Big 12, man. That's what we expect all year long.
No question. I mean, that's just what this league is. And you bring up BYU. They are number one once again, and we've been ahead of the curve on that. We've anointed BYU since, late September after that Baylor win. We've had them at number one for a while, and people are finally catching up on that as the Cougs number one in this week's poll. Number two, the Colorado Buffaloes.
Yep.
Buffs deserve it. They're number two in the standings, but they are playing some really good football right now at 7-2.
So you have a handful of teams that are 7-2 and a bunch that are also just 2 losses in conference. So Colorado has 2 losses this year. One is to, by the way, a bad Nebraska team.
Yeah.
Like, the more that we see that Nebraska team, we go, what on earth happened with Colorado at the beginning of the year? But then the other loss that they had was against Kansas State, who we find at that number 3 spot, who was in a bye this week. But for unceremoniously dropping the Iowa State Cyclones down to 4 after they've now lost 2 in a row. They're another team that have 2 conference losses, but for the Cyclones, it's 2 weeks in a row of losses. That gives them their first 2 conference losses just of the last 2 weeks against teams that are far inferior to this team, at least on paper.
Iowa State's trending backwards, and it's one of those programs that's always struggled with when they get in the spotlight, can they deliver? And they're coming up short in the past couple weeks. Number 5. This might be a little bit of a surprise, but I'm telling you, this team over the last month has been one of the hottest teams in the Big 12 and maybe in college football. Baylor. Baylor is playing some great ball. They had a bye this week, but Dave Aranda's seat should be cool right now. He's doing a great job. And Sawyer Robertson and that offense, they found answers there. Jake Spavital, the offensive coordinator, they are playing at a high level. I'm telling you, I think by season's end, this would be one of those teams in the Big 12. You're like, okay, glad we're not playing them because, and BYU's been very fortunate. They've played teams at the right time, and that can help their resume. And if Baylor keeps winning, I think that could be a good thing for BYU and its playoff resume potentially.
I'll get you that one. I'll say, look, because there are times I got to pick my battles on these power rankings, right? And I thought, okay, Baylor at 5, that's a bit high in my book. It's a little bit rich for my blood, considering that the number 6 team is Arizona State, and Arizona State is 7-2. Frankly, I would be okay putting Arizona State maybe right there behind Colorado in that 3 spot, just because of what Kenny Dillingham has done. And they beat UCF yesterday
without Cam Scadaboo.
Without Scadaboo, and by the way, if you're BYU fans, you should be scared to death about Scadaboo coming back healthy in 2 weeks. Or I guess, is it 2 weeks? Yes. 2 weeks down in Tempe. That's going to be a test, but we'll see. They might be a bigger shock than even BYU at the very, very top of the conferences right now. Frankly, every team I feel like at the top. BYU, Colorado, Arizona State, nobody had any of these guys on the bingo card. West Virginia at 7. It's a team that I mean, look, 6-4 on the year, but like those 4 losses we pointed out at that point were the teams that were almost, most of them were undefeated and most of them were nationally ranked, and so they've had a tough schedule, and they've only got 2 losses in Big 12 conference play.
Important win yesterday to keep Neil Brown's seat a little bit cool, because that fan base always wants to fire him, and no school wants to fire a coach this offseason, because with revenue sharing on the horizon, the $20 million tab that awaits, no one wants to pay out these massive buyouts to unemployed coaches. So big win for West Virginia to take down Cincinnati on the road. Number 8, TCU. As we talked about earlier, they're playing some pretty good ball as of late. Number 9, Texas Tech. Like, I've been hit and miss with this team. Like, they give you some great performances.
They're 6 one week, they're 10 the next. Yeah,
they're just too inconsistent with Joey McGuire to the point where I don't trust them. I would not put them in the top half of this league. I think the teams that we have from 1 to 8 would probably beat Texas Tech on a neutral site if they lined it up again with the Red Raiders. So it might be a little bit low, but I think it's a fair spot for this inconsistent Red Raider team.
Well, next up is Cincinnati, who lost to West Virginia yesterday. And by the way, that was a team that, if Cincinnati and West Virginia, if Cincinnati wins that game, and it was relatively close, you swap those teams between 7 and 10. That's how closely matched they are. Kansas is climbing themselves out of the very, very bottom of the conference poll as they absolutely blew the doors off of that Iowa State defense. We talked about how Iowa State was this defense was very consistent. Matt Campbell, tough nose, blah, blah, blah. They gave up almost 600 yards to the Jayhawks yesterday, and you should be absolutely nervous about the Jayhawks coming to Provo next week if you're a BYU fan.
That should definitely be a nerve-wracking spot because Jalen Daniels is playing some great football as of late. Number 12, UCF. Had a shot to take down Arizona State in Tempe, but couldn't get it done. I still think, though, UCF's going to be a team that, as they continue to progress this season, I think Dylan Risk, he's their guy. Like that was the huge move, and you wonder, what was Gus Malzahn thinking having him as the 4th-string quarterback all along?
He said to babysit dumb feelings of those NIL guys.
You got to question the quarterback evaluations, and that's where you then maybe say, is that something that Gus probably puts him on the hot seat? It's like, how was that guy the 4th-string quarterback all along when you're having these issues? Let's close this thing out. Number 13, Houston. 14, Utah, who's on a 5-game skid after falling to BYU. 15, Arizona. And then at the bottom, 16, Oklahoma State, 0-7 in Big 12 play.
Let's take a break. We'll come to our final segment, which is a look to next week's schedule, not just for BYU and Utah, but also across the entirety of the conference. It's 1st and 12. It is KSL News Radio. Mitch, Harper, Alex, Kirry. You can also find us on 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone. We'll be right back. Stay with us right here.